We don't even have to wait. We don't even have to wait to get Trump confessions. To get progress against Trump made in a court of law. Because he's doing it himself for free, unprompted. In fact, while Sean Hannity is desperately begging him not to, he's incriminating himself. Here's Donald Trump taking the egg, cracking it, and then just putting it right on his face. It's delightful. Let's watch him dig himself deeper with Sean Hannity, brought to you by Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski, and they constantly put out Willie Geist.
So there are other legal cases that Donald Trump is dealing with, including the documents issue, the Mar-a-Lago documents, and there are new developments this week that Donald Trump might have participated in possible obstruction with some of those materials that were at Mar-a-Lago. During an interview with Fox News last week, Donald Trump was asked whether he would personally look through boxes of documents from his presidency while they were stored at Mar-a-Lago. Here's his response last week.
I can't imagine you ever saying, bring me some of the boxes that we brought back from the White House. I'd like to look at them. Did you ever do that?
I would have the right to do that. There's nothing wrong with it.
But I know you. I don't think you would do it.
Well, I don't have a lot of time, but I would have the right to do that. Right. I would do that. There'd be
All right, let me move on.
Jesus Christ. Oh, God. We're going to play that bit again. I'm sorry, y'all. No. We have to. We have to.
You know, this is something that obviously we believe is a political persecution, and I think people on both sides of the aisle.
That's a little hint as to what's coming up. Yeah, come on. Hannity is begging Trump. It's not only softball. It's like t-ball. He's showing him exactly what to do. And he's giving him every opportunity to say just the simplest thing. Like, no, of course I wouldn't do that. I mean, look, let's not be totally underestimating Trump here. Why would Trump not just take that softball? Why would he do that? Because he's about to go to court over this, it would seem. He's going to go to court over this. It is going to be revealed whether he did or didn't do this thing. He's not going to be able to, again, switch gears. And then they play that Hannity interview where he says, I didn't take him. Of course I wouldn't do that. And then it shows, yeah, he did. He's got to stick with that effed up logic so that the story doesn't change. So that the defense of his people, or the defense his people will shout out, doesn't change. So, in other words, Hannity has reached the point where you can't stay in the realm of the sane and defend this guy. You can't agree that the existing laws we have on the books need to be followed and defend this guy. So that sweaty orange, all I can say is leather sock, I guess. That right there is between a rock and a hard place. He's got Hannity saying, you wouldn't do that now, and Trump saying, no, you dummy, I did do it. And we need to spin this a hell of a lot. And he doesn't let it go. And the result is he pretty much confesses on television.
Remember this. Yeah. This is the Presidential Records Act.
And Hannity goes, okay, so we move on. And then he just does not move on. Ugh.
I have the right to take stuff. Do you know that they ended up paying Richard Nixon, I think, $18 million for what he had? They did the Presidential Records Act. I have the right to take stuff.
Wait a minute. Presidential Records Act, yeah, in response to that thing he's talking about. And they didn't pay, they paid Richard Nixon's estate $18 million after, to compensate for the fact, for the manner in which they took back the documents Nixon stole. That's what happened. It wasn't like, all right, you know what? We're going to take Trump's literal interpretation of that in a moment and game that out. Because no matter what he said just there is disgusting. But what actually happened was Richard Nixon held on to a bunch of the people's documents, and the government said, "What? No, we're taking those back." And he said, well, you can't have them. And the government said, "Okay, move aside. We're taking these back." And then after they took them back, Nixon's estate, much later, sued the government, and they believe they settled for $18 million or something, or whatever he said. Whatever it was, I should say. And it was over the government saying, "Get out of here." Just the manner in which they took them back. But let's imagine that what Trump says is accurate, and that the picture he painted is accurate, and that Richard Nixon went through the White House, took a bunch of documents, and then the government later was like, "Oh, he got some good ones. We got to buy him back. What's he asking for?" He's asking for $25 million. Can we get him down to 10? Maybe, all right, 10's ambitious. Maybe we can get him down a little bit in the teens, high teens. Can't pay 25. Let's negotiate with the guy. We'll open up negotiations. Get a good salesman, and we'll open up negotiations. That's what Trump's implying happened, and what he's implying was happening with the documents he took. So he's suggesting that an American president, as part of the perks of their presidency, at the end they can be like, "All right, fellas, well, crack open the national security documents. Let's see what I can fit in a U-Haul. Some of this stuff's looking valuable. Oh, nuclear secrets for sure. I'm sure I didn't pronounce that correctly, but I'm equally sure government's going to pay for those. Dirt on foreign leaders. Yes, please. In my file folders, in the moving box, in the U-Haul. Okay, what will the government really need to pay me for? I am looting the White House." That's what he is suggesting. That's how he's suggesting that this works. If that was how it worked, we should give a beating to all of our presidents, just on general principle. All of them, Republican and Democrat, just not even out of anger, just general principle. Hiding to all of them. A proper caning, let's say, a belting at the very least. Because they will have earned it for not having changed that rule, and then we should change that rule. But that's not the rule. I'm going to let him go for a while, because he's digging his own hole, and I'm going to have an aneurysm before I even see this guy appear in court, for God's sake.
I have the right to look at stuff.
Willie.
You do?
Willie. Sean was tried to help him.
You're allowed to take stuff?
Meatball Don. He was trying. Oh, wait, that's Meatball Ron. Sean was trying to help Trump time and again. Okay, but I know you wouldn't do that. Sure, I would. Okay, let's move. And then he goes, "Let's move on." Yeah. And he's like, no, I want to completely prove the federal government's case. And then he goes,
"I'm sorry, it's just they have it wrong. They've got a funny take, and it's I love it. But let's be clear, they're not reading between the lines correctly. What happened was Sean Hannity was saying, "But you wouldn't do that. Just say you wouldn't do that." Yeah, that part they have right. Sean Hannity was trying to help him out desperately. But it's not that he's too dumb. He is dumb, but that's not why he did that. Call it correctly. Why was he doing that? Because he knows in short order we're going to see exactly what he did. In fact, I think since that interview, it came out that he personally went through the documents. Oh, boy. And withheld some, is the point. So what happened? What we just saw was Sean Hannity saying, okay, you didn't do that, right? That's the framing we're going with. And Trump saying, no, you idiot, no. At the point, the thing we're trying to say is that I'm allowed to do that. And he didn't say, I did do that. He just was like, I could do that. I could do that. Remember that I'm allowed to do that. Sean, remember I can do that. Because he did it. But he's not really allowed to do it. He broke the law. It would seem. This dude is actually going to have the book. I don't know. I've never seen a U.S. president in court before. But if they follow the same justice system, after all, then the book is going to be fastballed at his skull.
On improves the federal government's case, which, of course, is
not allowed to take stuff.
More relevant now, Willie, after the Washington Post story that broke this weekend.
If you're the prosecutor or the special counsel in this case, it's just clip and save these interviews, clip and save, some of it amounting to a partial confession. Remember, it was last September in a different interview with Sean Hannity when Donald Trump said you can declassify documents just by thinking about them. As former president of the United States, if he thought about them being declassified, then they in fact would be declassified. We should ask Chuck Rosenberg, as a former prosecutor himself, if you are the special counsel, if you are Jack Smith, what are you making of these interviews that Donald Trump is giving again, especially the ones to Sean Hannity?
You know, I was thinking, Willie, about when I was a federal prosecutor preparing for trial, I would literally have a manila folder, which I would label my cross-examination file. And every time I found a document or someone said something or something that I thought could be useful, I'd put it in that file. The file here would be enormous. I mean, as prosecutors, we collect stuff, we hold on to stuff, we never know exactly when we're going to need stuff. But Mr. Trump, from a prosecutor's perspective, if you're preparing for cross-examination, is a gift that keeps on giving. And so they're going to have a lot of information, a lot of clips, a lot of the things he's said to choose from. Whether or not he gets on the stand, whether or not they ever get to use it, we'll save that question for another day. But prosecutors are always collecting a cross-examination file, and Mr. Trump can't help himself.
I wish I had some of my cohorts with me now that I have a sheet of like ambitions for this network. And those ambitions are just people I intend to hire. They're people I came across in the news industry that at some point, if I ever get the ability, I'm going to make a job offer to. I wish I had them with me now. Because I would love to do a bit where we do an impression of the prosecutors every time Trump incriminates himself. Just does their case, just does the work of trying their case for them by talking in front of a camera. It's amazing. It's got to just be like high fives and laughing and falling on each other. Drinking, party hat tipped to the side. Good Lord.
Always talks about Mr. Trump, and that just makes the file bigger and bigger and bigger.
He just can't help himself. And I want us to play this clip again because, again, in light of the Washington Post reporting this weekend, it becomes even more relevant. Let's play this clip again in case you all will, first of all, miss Donald Trump's confession, and two, miss Sean Hannity trying to move him along, and he just wouldn't do it because he was like going, no, I like my hand on the hot stove so much, I'm going to put the other hand on the hot stove. Run it, TJ.
I can't imagine you ever saying, bring me some of the boxes that we brought back from the White House. I'd like to look at them. Did you ever do that?
I would have the right to do that. There's nothing wrong with it.
But I know you. I don't think you would do it.
Well, I don't have a lot of time, but I would have the right to do that. Right. I would do that. There'd be
nothing
wrong.
Let me move on.
Remember this. Yeah. This is the Presidential Records Act. I have the right to take stuff. Do you know that they ended up paying Richard Nixon, I think, $18 million for what he had? They did the Presidential Records Act. I have the right to take stuff. I have the right to look at stuff.
I have the right to take stuff and look at stuff even after, as the Washington Post suggests, federal investigators and the feds try to get him back. And federal investigators, the Post reports, have new and significant evidence which shows that after the subpoena was delivered, Trump was rummaging through boxes of the documents in his home because, Elise, he wanted to keep certain things in his possession that the federal government said he had to return to them.
And Joe, this is where Donald Trump could really get in trouble because that's obstruction.
Right.
And he differentiates himself from other former officials who might have a claim of inadvertently removing classified documents and having classified documents in their personal possession by the fact that he doesn't make good and make amends, and he continues to try to obstruct the government's case. And so you have this case happening in New York City, which one Republican operative called the Mickey Mouse paperwork case. But then you've got the classified document case and how Donald Trump has taken it possibly to the next level if he hasn't been forthright with investigators. And then from there, also you've got Georgia and then E. Jean Carroll next month. So while today is a big deal, there's plenty of other legal action to watch with Donald Trump.
And Joe, people I talked to in Trump's orbit in recent days, offer sort of two sides to how they feel about Manhattan. Yes, they think this could be a short-term political benefit for Trump. They also acknowledge that, of course, Trump doesn't really want to be indicted. No one does. He's concerned. He spent his whole life trying to avoid criminal prosecution. Here it is. But they also acknowledge they feel like this is a matter that can be dealt with. They think more legal peril lies elsewhere. And certainly the two that they say to me they're most worried about, Georgia, which we expect we'll hear about in about a month's time, right. And then this one here, because, yes, it's about the differences between how Joe Biden and Mike Pence handled their classified document matters and this one. They cooperated. They returned the documents. Donald Trump did not, and they feel like there's a real vulnerability here for obstruction, and Jack Smith seems to be working his way up, in his investigation and closing in, although perhaps he could save the taxpayers' money and time by just DVRing Fox News and therefore present his case to the grand jury.
Right, you've got...
Okay, hold up a second. I honestly think that Donald Trump, when we look back on this point in time, and what do they say? Any feelings you may have for me, any feelings of respect or admiration, buttress them. Because Donald Trump, buttress him, may be looked at as the man who saved America. Truly. I believe he will be looked at. In fact, I think that's, he's going to be the man that saved America. Can you imagine if somebody would have done the same crimes that Donald Trump did, but had just a little bit of sense? Like, was just a little bit intelligent, they wouldn't be caught for any of them. I mean, we've already had this demonstrated. George W. Bush got 7,000 of our sons and daughters killed. No punishment. Got the country into a war that messed up the planet for decades. No punishment. It took someone as blatant and crude and obvious as Donald Trump to force the Justice Department to take action because he was embarrassing us. He was such an obvious crook that it was an embarrassment to us. and we had no choice. He literally, he did what he said he would do. In 2016, he fulfilled the purpose he set out to do, or he said that he set out to do. Ironically, because he wasn't trying to. He was trying very hard not to, as a matter of fact. It's amazing. It's like, it's poetic, almost. He exposed the corruption of the United States. Look how difficult it's been to get this guy into a courtroom. Look at how blatant it had to be. Look, the important thing is going to be for us to not forget this is the state of our government. We need, as a culture, and I think we have, by the way, but we need to make sure this sticks. As a culture, we need to remember this is how our government works. This is how ineffectual they are. This is how hesitant they are to hold a powerful person to account. We need to fundamentally change that. Obviously, you do that by voting blue and voting in primaries. But credit where it's due, or even one might say discredit where it's due. Donald Trump may have saved the country just by being so corrupt, so blatantly a criminal that we could not ignore United States president's criminality anymore.
Your confession, you don't need depositions, you don't need interrogatories, just DVR Fox News at night whenever Trump talks, and you're in good shape. Chuck, I'm curious if you agree with those on the inside that Jonathan O'Meara has talked to. Of course, understanding that we still don't know what D.A. Bragg has. We have everybody's been talking about this indictment being strong or weak, being an embarrassment or being a final call to justice. We have no idea what this is going to be. So we lay that on the table right now, just like we don't know exactly what George is going to be, but we have an idea. Same thing with the documents case. Still looking at these things, do you agree with the assessment not only of people inside Trump world, but also with a lot of legal analysts, that right now he seems, from the fact patterns that are laid before us in the media, incomplete, but the fact patterns laid before us in the media and the law in these jurisdictions, relevant jurisdictions, that the Georgia case and the documents case, particularly on the obstruction of returning the documents, seem to be the two cases that could provide Donald Trump the gravest legal peril.
Yeah, I think that's right, Joe. And remember, with respect to the documents case, when the FBI executed the search warrant at Mar-a-Lago, they went forward on 3 predicate offenses. One of them at the time was obstruction, right? So the FBI had enough information at the time to include in the affidavit their concerns about obstruction. And as a prosecutor, that's something we always look for. First, because it's illegal, but second, because it also evinces a consciousness of guilt. There's no reason to move stuff or destroy stuff or hide stuff or counsel people not to tell the truth if you haven't done anything wrong.
I so rarely hear folks talking about this. Obstruction of justice, as they said with Nixon, the cover-up is worse than the crime. Often that's the case with obstruction of justice. In fact, often with Trump, that's the case. I don't know of an investigation he's been involved with that he didn't try to obstruct in some way. But there's that other part to it. Why? Why do you obstruct justice? But you don't necessarily have to have done the thing in order to obstruct the investigation. That's true. Not necessarily. But normally you did. It's pretty strong evidence. If you have been unfaithful to let's not even bring spouses into it. Let's keep it with jobs. Let's say you are looking for a job elsewhere, and your boss says, "Hey, can I look at your received emails and you say, actually, that's terrible. You should have privacy from your boss. Anyway, the point is there's a reason he doesn't want terrible analogies, utter train wreck. But there's a reason he didn't want people looking at these cases. It's not just that he doesn't like being investigated. Come on. He's habitually in trouble with the law, and he's habitually getting in investigators' way. That's going to be brought up in court. All right, that's all up there. I'm just underlining what this man is saying. It's yes, you have to presume innocence and all that other stuff, but you're still allowed to have 2 eyes, 2 ears, and a mostly functional brain. Why is this guy doing this thing? Well, it ain't because he's lawful. Good God.
And so if you're trying to turn a weak case into a strong case for the government, obstructing justice is one way of doing that. So I agree generally that the case in New York seems less important. That doesn't make it weak. And I know that's something that Mika and I talked about a couple of days ago.
And I don't agree that it's less important, but we move on.
It's not necessarily a weak case. The evidence could be compelling. It could be corroborated. There could be a lot of it. But in terms of charges, it's less serious. How do we know that? Well, for one, the underlying offense, and we'll see whether or not Mr. Bragg actually charges it, is a misdemeanor. By classification, a relatively low-level crime. If we see felony charges, and I expect we will, they'll probably be Class E felonies under New York state law. Again, a relatively low classification of felony. Doesn't mean these charges don't matter. It doesn't mean he won't be held to account. But I agree generally, Joe, with your supposition that the cases in Georgia and the cases under investigation by Jack Smith as special counsel are probably weightier.
All right, so that's just semantics. Weightier. These are all important. They are all of the utmost importance because they all involve criminality and, frankly, corruption within our government. What can you do? Folks, vote. For God's sake. God's sake. Vote in primary. And end the madness in general by just voting blue in 2024. There is not a reasonable alternative to the Democrats. I think America sees that. There's not a reasonable alternative to the Democrats. The GOP and MAGA, the combined forces that make the Republican Party, they're no good for running anything. No reasonable person is going to look at this and be like, well, Trump does have a point. He did stamp his feet and get red-faced and say, but I want him, I want him, I want him. Not going to happen. So the actual election is going to be the primaries. And it doesn't mean that we can sit on our hands when it comes to the general. I think it's a fight we're going to win. It doesn't mean we don't have to try. We'll lose it if we do another 2016, where we're like, yeah, so Trump's lost. It ain't even about Trump anymore. We have work to do, serious work to do. We need someone in the White House who we can push. That's Joe Biden. And then we need to give that person the tools that make it possible to do good legislation. But for Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin, we are, child poverty would still be down by, 40%? We got to get serious with this stuff. The time has come. Global warming has arrived in the way that has been warned about. We're not trusted on a international level. People will continue dying in Ukraine. Putin will continue being a murderer who pushes propaganda. and tries to start civil wars, we need to make sure that we've got a Democrat president in the White House and that they have a House and Senate which can pass bills easily. And we got to get to work. So, be prepared to vote blue in 2024. And remember, the main contests are going to be in the primaries. And it will be easier for us generally, both during the election, I feel, but certainly after the election, if you get very left-leaning folks.